Eiichiro Oda is cooking one hell of a spicy story soup, revealing the names of the 5 elder stars, revealing 3 new seraphim, and revealing one very, very old man who may or may not, but seriously may, be the father of the one and only red-haired Vigilant Shanks. That's nowhere near everything either. Oda also revealed Imu's name in this chapter and the weapon that destroyed the Lucia, and one thing that only the keenest of fictional pirate eyes will spot. But to kick things off, we have a bit of a reverie wrap-up, featuring appearances from many series classic characters that go by far too quickly. There's a montage of Igaram, Chakra, and Pell desperately searching for Vivi, which hit me so hard via the compound power of nostalgia. They're minor characters, but we went through so much with them to save Alabasta. And of all of the loyal characters in One Piece, these 3 are at the very peak. And I genuinely feel for them, having lost Vivi and Cobra, because Pell, Chakra, and Igaram are the kind of people who would much prefer to lose their own lives rather than those of their beloved king and princess, which is awkwardly ironic because 2 of those characters are completely immune to explosions and, as far as I'm aware, literally cannot be killed. It's the small details that I love though, that I love in a very hateful way. Because you see Igaram crying and just desperately going, hey, have you seen the Vivi? And then all of the royals around him have this look of complete disinterest. In fact, it's worse than that. Some of them look actively annoyed that Igaram is making noise. And Oda goes on to mirror this situation a bit further in by having another brief montage of the CP0 agents doing the exact same thing, searching for the missing Vivi, and in this case Sabo, by showing pictures to the crowd. And again, most of the royalty has the same response to this, which can be summed up as, who cares? The one exception to this is Stelly, who we see gawking over Vivi's photo, with his wife, Sari Nantokanete, being very displeased to say the least. Actually, you know what? I don't think I will ever get the chance to drop this again, so fun fact. Sari Nantokanete is based on Marie Antoinette, and her name quite literally translates to something net. She's basically a gag character. Stelly needed some sort of regal wife, and Oda was like, I don't know, let's something Antoinette, and that'll do, good enough. But despite this being a gag, this section is a perfect reflection of the situation, because it highlights how corrupt the world government is, even on levels below that of the world nobles, because only one royal is even bothering to look at the missing person, and it's for all of the wrong reasons. And special shout out to CP0 members Gizmonda and Spandam, who are doing all the work here. It's, well, I can't honestly say it's ever good to see Spandam, but he is indeed here. One small character thing that I do love about him though is that Spandam has his gun drawn, and that is such a Spandam thing to do because he can't assert control on his own. To make people pay attention to him, he needs to literally pull a gun and threaten them. Vivi and Walpole then have their thread wrapped up by stowing away on the Aegis Kingdom ship, which is the vessel of King T IV, better known as Clockbeard, primarily due to his clockbeard. And in this section, Vivi and Walpole appear to be communicating telepathically, because they're not using speech bubbles, they're using think bubbles, which is a thing that Oda likes to do from time to time in situations where we need to be very, very quiet. Walpole doesn't tell Vivi what he saw, and this might be a moment of minor development for him, because he actually saw her father murdered, amongst other things, and I don't blame Walpole for not wanting to be the one to deliver that news. Whereas I feel like Drum Island era Walpole would be delighted to be the first one to deliver it, if only to be the first one to take in Vivi's fresh reaction. That's just the kind of guy Walpole was when he actually did villain stuff. But this also might, and this is a bit of a stretch, but it might be an effort to protect Vivi, because if she finds out about what he saw, then that's an automatic death sentence for her. Meanwhile, Bonnie stowed away on the Tajin Kingdom ship, which is the nation ruled by Queen Mororodon, although maybe I should say was, because both the Aegis Kingdom, which again is the ship that both Vivi and Walpole boarded, as well as the Tajin Kingdom, both of which were said later in the chapter to have coincidentally rebelled. So the status of King Clockbeard and Queen Mororodon might be more precarious at the moment. And it's hard to tell, but to me it looks like Bonnie may have invoked her child form to make it easier to stow away, which I think is perfect because it gives us a raw look at her overall situation, which you can essentially boil down to a frightened girl concerned about her father. And also hungry, very hungry, always hungry. Sabo obviously boarded the Lucia ship, but mate, he got messed up so much more than I thought after the last chapter. He is visibly shaking with pain, and that wound, mate, that wound looks pretty brutal. This kind of damage to a Logia user of Sabo's caliber is pretty insane, and it shows us that Imu and the 5 elders are no joke. And speaking of, everyone, get your narrative toilet paper ready because we have a colossal info dump incoming. coming. One of the biggest questions in the series since Jaya has just been answered in full, which are the names and roles of the 5 elders. It's one of those things where only in One Piece can the names and CVs of 5 old men excite me this much. But to complement their Greco-Roman theming, they've been given the names and roles of classical deities. And I don't want to say I called it because I didn't, but I did get all of their planet names sort of right, just in the wrong order and without all of the superfluous stuff around them. Starting with J. Garcia Satin again, we already knew his name, but he is our god of science. And all of a sudden it makes perfect sense as to why he's being sent to Egghead, because that's his whole domain. And just as a bit of a thing, the next names may change with the official translation because honestly they're pretty wacky, but for now, Mr. Blonde is named Saint Shepherd Jupiter. This is one that may change because Jupiter is clearly just a reference to Jupiter, but I also don't have a grasp on the nuances of Japanese. In any case, he is the god of agriculture, hence a shepherd, which sounds kind of boring, but look, agriculture is everything. Do not ever underestimate the importance of farm. And actually, come to think of it, it's probably now his direct responsibility to deal with the food shortage on Marijois. Samurai Gandhi is Samurai no more, and is in fact Saint Ethan Baron V. Nusjuro, which of course contains a reference to Venus. Turns out he is the god of finance, which is fun because I had him down as the Mars-named god of war due to the sword. Seriously, the god of finance looks like some kind of tough, justice-fueled executioner. Meanwhile, the god of justice looks like a banker. Specifically though, his name is Saint Topman Valkyrie, which is referencing Mercury. And this is where my problem comes back, because Mercury is the god of financial gain and commerce. So he's named after the thing it is that he looks like, but he has the role of war. To be fair though, none of the elders have the roles of their respective god names. And our final elder is Saint Marcus Mars, which is obviously Mars, god of the environment, which is an interesting one because at first it makes him sound like he's just really proactive about recycling and reducing emissions. But I imagine the role to be more akin to that of an earth deity like say Gaia. And then there's Imu, who in this chapter is like a child who has just learned how to talk. Now that he started, we can't shut him up. There was a lot of conversation and 2 massive things came from it. One of which being that the weapon used to destroy Leloucia was allegedly made by Vegapunk, which goes against Ivankov's theory later on in the chapter that an ancient weapon was used. But also maybe they're both correct. Perhaps Vegapunk has replicated an ancient weapon to some extent, and at the very least this explains why they didn't use this for the Ohara incident. But the big question is why? I've always stated that Vegapunk is a bit of a tricky existence, because as much of a good person as Stellar appears to be, I do agree with the Bonnie take, which is that he unleashes inventions upon the world and completely disregards the damage they inflict under world government control, all in the pursuit of science. Whether that's actual weapons like the Seraphim, the Pacifista, or your standard pew-pew weapons, or whether it's more innovations like the sea stone lining under the ships, thus allowing the Marines to travel across the Calm Belt and enforce the tyranny of the world government more easily. And surely this is something that we'll have to reckon with at some stage, especially since now, again allegedly, Vegapunk's invention has caused an Ohara-level incident. Secondly, Imu orders the elders to retrieve Vivi, not Nefertari Vivi. Imu said her name on a very familiar basis as if they're some sort of old Nakama friends. So Vivi is absolutely not off the hook. If anything, she's now been placed on a significantly larger hook and is becoming a Nika Robin-like figure. So she might even get her own bounty if the world government are desperate enough, which I would like because it would push her further into the many, many arms of the Straw Hats. And as if there wasn't enough in this chapter, Oda also dumps 3 more Seraphim on us. I actually had one of my artists draw these 3 ages ago in anticipation that they actually existed, and full credit to him because I don't think he was too far off. Quite curiously, S. Crocodile has Crocodile's face scar, and that's odd because Crocodile got that when he fought Whitebeard. So in theory, the child version shouldn't have it. And look, I don't know, is child abuse the right word? Because I'm thinking that they may have purposely scarred S. Crocodile all for the sake of brand recognition. Because really, Crocodile is a child, he's not really recognizable as Crocodile. Or did Whitebeard's strike hit Crocodile so deeply that it became embedded in his DNA from that moment on? But either way, he is definitely the Seraph that I'm most interested in right now, because obviously they can't give him the Sunasuna no Mi. Crocodile is also, quite frankly, the physically weakest of the 7 warlords, so I'm really keen to see what they've done to compensate for that. Crocodile's greatest strength has always been his intelligence, which isn't the greatest of features if we're looking to create mindless child slaves. These seraphim all seem like they mimic their original personalities a lot more though. S Flamingo has that terrifying Doflamingo smile. S Bat, or S Gecko maybe, has that joyous pre-Kaido sense of fun and adventure, very similar to Luffy's attitude actually. And then of course S Crocodile just looks more bored than anything. And I suspect that S Crocodile and S Flamingo in particular may become a lot more difficult to control over time. Because if their personalities keep developing, then I don't think the world government can keep those egos in check. To the Revolutionary Army, where we wrap up all of the Leloucia Gap events, with Sabo not having the heart to tell people that he isn't a murderer. So I find this fascinating, right? Not Sabo, but the actual people of Leloucia. They assume that because Cobra was a world government king, that automatically makes him as bad as their monarchy was. Meanwhile, cut to Alabasta, and you have the citizens mourning Cobra's death like he was a genuine member of their family. And I like that because both groups of civilians are what we would broadly define as good guys. And one of those groups is celebrating the death of a man they didn't even know the first thing about. And Sabo, well, Sabo's just going along with it. And it makes me wonder if this is going to become a bit of a problem down the line. So I don't know if this is a bit much for One Piece, but what happens if this emboldened group meets another king? Let's say King Riku, for example, another benevolent, well-loved figure. Would they immediately follow in what they believe are Sabo's footsteps and go for the kill, assuming that Riku is just as corrupt and as horrible as many other kings are? There's a strong potential for tragedy and social commentary about things like, hey, maybe we should learn a little more before jumping on the cancelled from life bandwagon. This section also borders on confirming that Imu is one of the 20 founding kings, floating the name Saint Imu of House Nerona. And Ivankov even goes full YouTuber here by laying out his theory and connecting all of the dots. So I think we're at a point of, say, 99.9% certainty that Imu was one of the founding members of the world government and was made perpetually youthful by a previous user of the Ope Ope no Mi. Oh, and also, I thought we'd have to wait longer for this, but Oda has gone and revealed the leader of the Holy Knights. This name is Vigilant Garling. And before we even touch on his amazing design, let it be clear. This man is almost certainly a relative of Shanks. Garling could be his father, his uncle, or any number of other relations. With the exceptions of son and brother, I guess, that would be odd. Garling is also the former king of God Valley, which I suppose makes Shanks part of the God Valley monarchy, or at least what used to be the monarchy. And thus, little Prince Shanks ended up in a chest that ended up aboard the ship of the future pirate king. I have to say though, Garling, he gives me big Garp vibes, because you always need to be wary of old men in One Piece. They don't tend to live this long without a very good reason. Garling's moon design is amazing, although it's one of those situations where you'd always want people to be looking at you from a specific diagonal angle. Kind of loses its fun charm if they see you straight on. And the big cliffhanger that we're left on is that Saint Mosgard has been sentenced to death. At this point, it's unclear to me whether he's still alive or not. All of the blood and the wounding may suggest that his sentence has already been carried out or is currently being carried out. But even if he is still alive, who could possibly come to save him at this point? We just spent this whole chapter watching people go home, and this event is happening in the modern timeline. So at this point, the reverie's been over for weeks, meaning that characters like Sai and Leo are probably long gone. But the very idea of Garling is terrifying. A man who has the power to judge even the self-professed gods of this planet. Eiichiro Oda has certainly given us a lot to think about over the next 4 weeks, whilst One Piece takes a break, and I'll be explaining all of that in the next video.